The movie hit of 1982 was E.T., the extraterrestrial marooned on Earth. Is a story like E.T. sheer fantasy, or is there hard evidence that extraterrestrials are not as unlikely as we think? With me today is Ed Barker, the director of the Manitoba Center for UFO Studies. Well, Ed, how'd you like E.T.?
Loved it. It's a great PR job.
Sure, but it's fantasy.
That is fantasy.
The whole thing is fantasy, Ed.
No, I don't know. There is evidence to say that it isn't. It's a very controversial subject. To the public mind, it's very important. To the scientist, it's an enigma.
Well, certainly a subject which needs to be examined scientifically.
Definitely.
But hasn't it been?
It's a difficult subject to examine scientifically. It doesn't sit still for you. You can't take it into the laboratory, at least as far as we know we can't. Mm-hmm. It's a thing you have to do through statistics, through interpretation of data from people who have been taken to the edge of reality and in some cases left there. You know, it's a very exciting sort of thing to them. It addles them, it bothers them a lot, it disturbs them a lot. The stories are bizarre, perfectly believable. The people are not lying. They're telling you something that happened to them or they have perceived to have happened to them. This is how we have to deal with it.
How long does the tradition in Manitoba go?
I have reports going back in my research from 1897.
Really? Of UFOs in Manitoba?
What we would call today UFOs.
Well, of course, we should remember that UFO is simply an unidentified flying object.
Doesn't mean spaceship.
It can be the rock that somebody, got hit in the head with and then told the stories.
Until it's unidentified, until it's identified, it's an UFO.
Yeah.
Manitoba, though, has had its fair share of UFO activity, mostly in the 60s and 70s, and as it turns out, statistically, this is the peak years for Canada, what they call flaps, or when a great deal of activity happens. As we get closer to the present day, it's strangely enough, or maybe not so strange, the sightings or the events are those portrayed in E.T., close encounters of the third kind, abduction cases where people have claimed to have been taken aboard UFOs, examined medically and otherwise, and then released. But when it does come up, the stories are virtually the same all over the world. They are taken aboard this thing, whatever, that has round rooms, soft light, strange-looking people, about 4 or 5 feet tall, gray skin, large eyes, bald, this kind of thing. And what they do is they set them up on this table and go through a medical examination.
Sounds like a collection of little CBC executives.
Doesn't it?
Way off up in some, place in the sky.
I love it.
But, I must say, I know you're serious about this, and I know that a great many other people are.
We try to be.
And I think we really have to have a look at it periodically.
I think so.
Just to keep in touch. In the event that something comes along, because there have been some suspicions about the behavior, for example, of the United States Air Force.
Definitely. This is a very interesting story. I don't know if you're aware of this Freedom of Information Act a number of years ago. The United States government and the CIA, FBI was sued by CAUS, which is a synonym for Citizens Against UFO Secrecy. It was in New York. The suit was upheld, and the CIA, etc., had to divulge what information they had on UFOs.
Okay, but what information did they have?
They had 1,500 documents released, and in the documents established the fact that in 1975 there's this extremely increased activity over sensitive areas, flyovers, pursuit cases where armed aircraft were actually sent up after objects that were seen visually and on radar. In many cases, the aircraft radar was locked onto the target.
Okay, now we have this bit of film that you brought along, which was taken about 40 miles from Winnipeg, near the town of Carman, Manitoba.
Here you see slides, actually. These are the slides taken by a lady by the name of Giesbrecht. These were taken other than the movies. What they show are sequential shots of this object as it zooms. Now, here is the film footage. Notice the undulation or sine wave motion. This is fairly characteristic of a UFO flight path.
All I'm seeing here is a light dot on some film.
You notice here the thing is moving around.
Yeah.
It'll pause in a second and kind of mushroom up. Instantly it'll appear at the top of the screen with no intervening motion whatsoever. This is what they call a nocturnal light.
Yeah, but I mean, surely this could be done in any creative film producer's laboratory.
Yes, it could. Quite frankly, it could. As can a great deal of photographs. Pictures are not always worth 1,000 words. This film was taken by Alan Kerr, and he was just doing this on spec one evening, and he had heard about the sighting. This sighting occurred, several times.
Has anybody ever come back with the marks of having been on one of these ships?
Very definitely. Right here in Manitoba, we have one of the finest cases on record. It's a very interesting case. It took place at Falcon Lake. This is back in '67, and the gentleman involved, Michalak, was prospecting. As he was prospecting, he had stopped for lunch, and he saw these bright lights. He looked up. As he was looking, the thing came down. One of them came down, one flew off, came about 160 feet away from him, made all kinds of light changes, like a light show. It was the most magnificent thing, he said. Turned into a silver-shaped object about 35 feet in diameter, and as he watched it, it went through further color changes. He decided to go up closer to it. He walked up almost within touching distance, started calling it, and as he looked at this thing, a hatch opened up, according to his story. Now, this is all, he was hypnotically regressed, and this was all looked into.
Have you talked to him personally?
Oh, personally, yes. This is about, as I said, 67 and 67.
Is he still alive?
Yes, he is.
In Manitoba?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
The upshot of this whole thing is that as he stepped back from viewing this thing, it was very hot and very bright.
Yeah.
The thing tilted, started swinging around in a counterclockwise direction, bringing some vent holes, or what appeared to be vent holes, in front of him. This hit him in the chest, knocked him down, and this thing took off. To shorten the story somewhat, he eventually became very ill. It started nauseating. He started seeing spots. He lost everything in his stomach. Eventually, over the next few weeks, he lost a great deal of weight. His lymphocyte count went down drastically, almost lethal. All of the signs were of a cancerous kind of thing or of radiation burning. He was taken to Pinawa, it's a local establishment, yeah. No radiation whatsoever. Eventually this kind of thing calmed down and he went back to work. About 9 months later, he collapsed at work. When they rushed him into the hospital, there was a series of dots on his chest. This proceeded to come back every 3 months for about 14 months, about a year and a half, thereabouts, let's say.
5 times or so.
Yes.
Came back, yeah.
Now, in trying to explain this, none of the doctors here in Winnipeg could do so. It was decided eventually by his doctor to send him to Mayo Clinic, and here is really the freaky part of the whole thing. He went there, he was examined. We know this because he has all kinds of documentation proving he was there. Mm-hmm. His plastic card, his letters of introduction. When he came back, his doctor, of course, wanted to resume this business here. Nothing was sent back. Letters were sent to Mayo Clinic. Nothing came back, except the bills, which he proceeded to pay bit by bit through a money order. He has all of this documentation. We finally got a letter back after a year or so of trying, saying, in effect, that they don't know anything about Stephen Michalak. That, as far as they could find out, he's never been there. And yet we have all of this documentation proving that he was.
You asked the Manitoba government to check it out?
No, we did not.
Was it paid for by any kind of Canadian health care?
Well, Ed Schreier now was our MLA in Ottawa at this time.
Yeah.
And he brought it up in the House. And Cadieux, who was the defense minister, said that there would be no forthcoming announcements with the Michalak case.
I guess, boy, that's really a remarkable story.
It's a marvelous story.
Yeah, it sure is. And it certainly lends credence to the whole concept.
Yes, it does.
I guess what we need still is a bit of hardware, isn't it?
Well, there are fabulous stories that we've heard since the 40s about crashed UFOs, and the USA government is taking these things away with little bodies.
It's certainly fascinating. I don't believe that they exist, but I'm fascinated at the story and at the prospects. It'll certainly be exciting when we have a look at that first airplane, Ed, and we thank you for bringing the film with you today and for telling us the story. Ed Barker from the Manitoba Centre for UFO Research. Thank you very much.